Righto, now for more on our top story. Let's get some reaction from the political fallout from the Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, his arrest, as well as a sense of how the public has responded. I'm pleased to say Spiked Online Editor Tom Slater joins me now. Tom, thank you for being with me. We saw the statements that came out late last night. Everyone has so far said that the law must take its course. But this presents a really interesting constitutional question now as well. Because if Andrew were to be charged with a crime and then potentially even at some point convicted of a crime, what would that do for the fact that he is currently eighth in line to the throne?
I mean, it would be absolutely seismic. It's already been seismic that we've seen a member of the royal family arrested for the first time since the 1700s, according to the historians. And just think about how this would play out if this ever got to the point of charges, this ever got to the point of prosecutions. You would have it being passed on to the Crown Prosecution Service. You would have him in the Crown Court. He was arrested yesterday by police officers who swear allegiance to the Crown. So the clear sense of historical weight to this, the clear sense of if any charges are brought and any guilt is ascribed of sort of betrayal of the institution is going to be pretty pronounced. And it's not a surprise that many people on the sort of Republican side of the argument have already, even with just this arrest having taken place, kind of hopped on this to suggest that something is rotten in the House of Windsor beyond what Prince Andrew himself, or the former Prince Andrew, I should say, has been accused of.
Well, I talked about that polling at the top of the show that Ipsos put out last night, and bad timing to some degree, because of course they took that poll before all of this happened. So you've got a view of sort of the days leading right up to the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, and he's got support. I thought it was extraordinary. Apparently, in the UK, there are 5% of people who have a favourable view of Andrew. I'd like to know who that 5% are. But clearly there are people who think that he's been hard done by in all of this. I read an interesting piece on the Times of London today talking to neighbours in and around Sandringham. And the reporter who was there was saying that there was a feeling amongst younger people that they spoke to that, Andrew is awful and he needs to go and he's a drag on the royal family. But a lot of older people who would have known Andrew for all their entire lives, I suppose, are somewhat more sympathetic. How much sympathy is there for Andrew?
I mean, from what I can measure, it doesn't seem like the sympathy goes particularly far or particularly deep. Even before we get into his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, even we get into what he's being investigated here for, which is misconduct in public office and allegedly using his time as the trade envoy to potentially pass on information to Jeffrey Epstein or anyone else which they might have been able to benefit from in some way, shape or form. Even before we get into all of that, Prince Andrew was seen as a bit of a playboy, seen as the one who was, again, kind of jet setting and getting up to things that he might not otherwise have been getting up to if he wasn't a member of the royal family. So I don't think there's ever really been a tremendous amount of sympathy or affection for Prince Andrew, but we're in an entirely different territory now. On the sort of question of whether or not he's been hard done by, it's a difficult thing to talk about a royal being hard done by in the best of times. But I think one thing which is slightly unfortunate is that this narrow investigation into misconduct in public office is being used by some of his critics and some critics of the monarchy to vindicate the idea that he was up to his necks in whatever depraved activities Jeffrey Epstein may or may not have been getting up to in relation to sexual assault and trafficking. That's clearly not what this investigation is about. Andrew's always denied any wrongdoing, and I think it's quite important that whilst people are well within their rights to judge Andrew for what he's being investigated for here, this doesn't kind of vindicate the broader narrative that he was, as I say, directly implicated in anything else that might have been swirling around the internet that we've been talking about.
It feels a bit perverse me saying this, but the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, in some way must be feeling a bit relieved because, of course, all the heat when it came to the Epstein files until now, or a lot of the heat, had been on him and his appointment of Lord Peter Mandelson as their ambassador to the United States. Now you suddenly have a much bigger story on the scene. Surely for Sir Keir, that's some welcome air.
I think you're right. As you say, it feels perverse to say it, but I think it has taken some of the heat off of the Prime Minister, because if it was only a week or so ago that it felt like one of the main kind of casualties of this latest round of the Epstein files being released was going to be Keir Starmer's government himself, that when Peter Mandelson, again, not too long ago, our ambassador in Washington, was himself being investigated, was himself having his properties raided and searched, that this raised questions about the Prime Minister and his judgment. So I guess here we've got someone even more unsympathetic to various members of the public in the form of Andrew being investigated, and takes some of the heat off of Starmer and suggests, I suppose, kind of feeds the sense that this is a broader problem with the establishment. This wasn't just one ambassador who shouldn't have been appointed by a Prime Minister under fire. So, yeah, perverse, as you say, but nevertheless it has taken some of the heat off of the embattled PM.
Indeed. Tom Slater, thank you for joining me.